during the Watergate investigation, it was discovered that there was a plan originated in the White House to surface a submarine off the coast of Cuba and paint the second coming of Christ over the island of Cuba using holograms. Which is well within our technology today. The idea was that since there is a large Catholic population in Cuba, they would be so upset by this vision that this would saturate the communication channels, the telephone system in Cuba, long enough for an invasion to take place.
How interesting. I never heard of that.
Well, I think that's a classic in psychological warfare, but that kind of manipulation is well understood, and I have personally investigated several apparently genuine UFO cases where there was in fact a manipulation. My conclusion, the conclusion of scientists working with me, was that there was in fact a manipulation taking place, and that it was not a hoax on the part of the witnesses, but a hoax on the part of somebody much better organized.
Alien technology. In the mid-20th century, U.S. Army research and development at the Pentagon brought the world into a new age. Incredible advances were made, which helped bring Americans to the highest standard of living ever achieved by a nation. Were outside sources and government influences involved in the origins of high technology? Does the new quantum leap in technological sophistication suggest the role of some outside influence? Could technology like the microchip, which is ubiquitous in our lives, have come from an extraterrestrial source? Is it alien technology?
If the acquisition of alien technology is a fact, that certainly could have happened. My guess is that if we did pick up any technology at all, it would have then landed in a very sensitive, compartmentalized intelligence area in which only a very limited number of people would have access to that information.
In the late 40s, the U.S. military recovered a spacecraft of unknown origin that utilized extraordinarily advanced technology for propulsion, communication, surveillance, and scientific inquiry. This technology was previously only theorized by scientists. This shocking discovery prompted President Harry S. Truman to organize the Majestic 12, an elite group of high-level government officials, military officers, scientists, and academicians. They devised a plan to dissect and assess the potential application of these technologies for military and commercial use. This process came to be known as reverse engineering. With the advent of the Cold War, the Majestic 12 and its program was conducted under the highest level of secrecy since the Manhattan Project. Their goal was to disseminate these technologies to the private sector at firms which were already developing technologies garnered from the war effort. In August of 1947, an alien-created microcircuitry artifact was delivered to Bell Labs. Bell Labs was ready for the challenge of reverse engineering. Within 5 months, by December of that same year, Bell Labs would introduce to the public the first electronic transistor. Bell Labs physicists Walter Brattain, John Bardeen, and William Shockley were the first to successfully reverse engineer microcircuitry. This first example of reverse engineered technology showed crudeness in the area of micromanipulation of particles. The revolutionary ability to control electrons would permanently replace the crude vacuum tube bulb.
First of all, Shockley and his team had been working on transistor technology. Of course, nobody called it a transistor back then, but they were working on this technology, basically an electronic gate to send electrons through that was more efficient than the vacuum tube. Now, the workbench notes that they had back then, the notes themselves were reverse engineered. They didn't publish those workbench notes until after 1949.
Soon, all life on Earth would be affected by this application of outside information. On the day that was declared the day of discovery, life on this planet changed. Later, General Arthur Trudeau took over the responsibility of distributing technological artifacts from U.S. Army R&D offices at the Pentagon. Colonel Philip J. Corso, intelligence officer for Army Research and Development at the Pentagon, was the first to step forward with information about alien technology.
In 1997, when Lieutenant Colonel Corso published his national best-selling book, neither the federal government nor any corporation or individual sought to discredit or refute his revelations about the Pentagon distributing alien technology to the private sector.
All this was known, only it wasn't known in the form where we gave an artifact to somebody. We gave them research and development projects.
One of the things that strikes you most about Philip Corso is not just the fact that he sounds credible, but when you go into his background and you look at the places he's been and where he served and what assignments he's had through the different wars from World War II through Korea, then back to the Pentagon, when you look at that, what you see is that the guy just rings credible. He is like rivet plate metal. Trudeau brought him in. He sat at the foreign technology desk as the deputy at that desk for 90 days, and then he went black. He went secret and became Trudeau's deputy and carry out Trudeau's own assignment, which was get this material from the spacecraft into American industry, the only place it could be safe.
Are these alien technologies? What kinds of applications did we reverse engineer from outside technologies?
Here, Corso said in 1961, he was looking at what turned out to be a fully functional electronic microcircuit. And they brought those, he said, to Bell Labs, because they knew that back in 1947, Trudeau had told him that the Truman administration, that the Army had brought wiring panels from that, they called it a lander, They call it an alien lander. They brought that to New Jersey, where Bell Labs was, and what Truman said to them back in 1947 was, he didn't know what this was, but he said, what is the lowest common denominator? What is the least complicated device you can create, you can reverse engineer from this?
How did we show seeming mastery of the atom without a complete understanding of it? For thousands of years, our concept of the atom was very simple. Only now do we know otherwise. Albert Einstein was the first known theorist on stimulated emission and general and special relativity. These provided a simple conception of the atom for people of the 20th century.
One of these atoms probably would appear as a tiny elastic sphere, a sphere formed by negatively charged electrons swarming around a massive nucleus of positive electricity.
Public opinion holds Albert Einstein as the foremost authority of the atom. Yet, he did all of his work without ever actually seeing one. Today's scientific activity is being done on the quantum level. Theoretical universal string theories contradict some of Einstein's presumptions on the nature of universal law. Regardless of how scientific theory has developed, recent trends in reverse engineering of alien technology couldn't have begun without these scientific foundations.
What does the atom mean to us today? No one had ever seen the atom until the present, but the concept has already helped shape society. Is the microchip an intrusion from an outside source? There should have been a parallel in our understanding of what was being created. Without a parallel comprehension of this technological quantum leap, the result has been social disintegration, alienation, and dysfunction. Our scientific understanding has reached downward to the submolecular world and upward to a new global awareness. Yet these advances contradict a diminishing sense of both community and of our responsibility to Earth and to its future generations. The reverse engineering theory holds that the most advanced technology is the result of an outside influence.
Looking at technological advances today and trying to explain how those breakthroughs came about in our society, either way, reverse engineering fits right along with the natural progression of things when new technologies emerge.
Critics of this viewpoint put reverse engineering into a category that includes paranormal mythology. Well, this is merely an excuse to discount evidence that would lead to a new perspective. Nevertheless, the microchip has become an integral part of many of the electrical machines and appliances that we use today. Its fundamental purpose is to manipulate electrons at the molecular level to perform as electronic switches. In 1958, it was Jack Kilby who was credited with inventing the microchip.
In 1965, semiconductor pioneer Gordon Moore predicted that the number of transistors contained on a computer chip would double every year. This is now known as Moore's Law. Deciphering the microprocessor took 23 years. The microprocessor brought us to increased speed of control of information. In 1970, when Ted Hoff revealed the microprocessor, how much was known about electron behavior? For decades, electrons worked in microprocessors while scientists tried to figure out exactly how they worked. At that time, research was still all in theory. We had no understanding of micro-manipulating mechanisms, ion beam implantation, and electron beam lithography, all used now in manufacturing of electronics. Picosecond imaging circuit analysis is currently used at IBM to study the behavior of electrons in microprocessors. Circuit analysis has produced this high-powered camera to study microcircuitry. A picture of the speeding electron is taken within a trillionth of a second. It has been 40 years since the microchip was invented. Why only now are researchers seeing the submolecular level? Since we can only now recognize electrons at the atomic level, does this support the notion that reverse engineering produced this technology?
Is our modern use of microchips and other advanced technologies actually a result of alien technology? Why was the development of alien technology so clandestine? And why would it be so harmful for the public to have this knowledge? What would happen if we learned about the true origins of the laser?
Light amplification by stimulated emission of radiation. In 1958, surrounded by much controversy, the laser was introduced. The controversy was a result of the dispute over the question of the inventor of the laser. The litigation that ensued only confuses the fact that no one can claim to be the sole inventor of these technologies.
Well, the basic idea really isn't so very complicated. This is a system for amplifying light waves, and it does it something like this, that inside of this tube, we give atoms excess energy by passing an electric current through them. The light wave travels through these atoms then, takes away some of their energy, and thereby amplifies the light wave. It becomes more and more energetic. It's reflected here, passes through again, is amplified more, reflected again, and passes back and forth many times until it becomes very intense. And one can see here the beam coming out. It travels along a very long distance without spreading very much.
Credited as the inventors of the laser, did Arthur Scalo, Charles Towns, or Gordon Gould know where the outside information came from? The laser comes from the application of stimulated emission to a crystal. A photon is introduced through optical pumping. Mirrors are used for multiplying the emission of active photons. How was the idea of the use of mirrors introduced into laser development? This burst in radiation, as all the atoms discharge photons, results in a cascade of light. The beam generated by most lasers is pencil thin and maintains its size and direction over great distances.
Army laboratory at Columbia University, which staged its first test on a laser right around 1960. That's where they took the laser cutting tool. Not to say this is what a laser is. They already knew what a laser was. What they needed was a working benchmark model of what they could reverse engineer to get a quantum leap on the very technology they were trying to develop.
Technology has now harnessed light. The molecular arrangement of crystal gives direction to light. It is the same molecular arrangement that contains light. We now control information in this light. Some of the companies that were involved in reverse engineering of fiber optics are Bell Labs, Hughes Aircraft, General Electric, IBM, and Corning Glass. Research was done by thousands of people before the mystery of light unraveled. Unlike Thomas Edison and the light bulb, people are not aware that Charles Kao contributed to one of the greatest achievements in technology, the harnessing of light. Why isn't Kao a household name? Has he been lost in the process of reverse engineering?
Fiber optics have been manufactured and sold to the public with no question as to its origins. 1,000,000 years of evolution overnight. How did this happen?
Smaller than a human hair, the fiber is 2 layers, a crystal core with a glass layer. 2 strands of fiber optic cables can carry over 1,000 conversations. Light is reflected inward from the interface of the 2 layers. Even though alien crystal fiber applications may surpass our current scientific understanding, fiber optics is so far our greatest reverse engineering achievement. Evidence of high technology continues to surface from locations all around the world, dating back thousands of years. The precision attained by these artifacts is a paradox. Present-day scholars remain mystified by the high technology of the ancients. No accurate record has ever been found which has information about the origins of these technologies. Frank Drake, Harvard astronomer, formulated an equation to speculate at the number of intelligent, communicating civilizations there are in our galaxy. N represents the number of stars in the Milky Way galaxy. Current estimates of this number are 100 billion. P is the fraction of stars that have planets around them. Current estimates range from 20% to 50%. E is the number of planets per star that are capable of sustaining life. Estimates range from 1 to 5. L is the fraction of planets in E, where life evolves. I is the fraction of L, where intelligent life evolves. C is the fraction of I that communicate. L is the fraction of the planet's life during which the communicating civilizations live. The answer, N, is the number of communicating civilizations in the galaxy. According to Drake, even the most pessimistic estimates yield hundreds to thousands of communicating civilizations. Through the media, we are already sensitized to the possibility of alien life forms. To maintain a logical perspective is a challenge, considering our point of reference is only the popular media.
The dominant worldview that we've all been raised in for several hundred years now is that that we are alone in a lifeless universe. I think even if a better worldview or a more truthful one or one that opens up consciousness to a much more interesting universe, even when that would be the result, change is still resisted, because whatever your existing worldview is, it gives us a kind of complacent sense that we understand our world. And when something comes along that completely shatters that, then we don't understand. We don't have control. Anything else can follow, you know.
We're not human!
A half a century ago, alien technology made an immediate impact.
On Halloween night of 1938, Orson Welles' radio program War of the Worlds showed just how Americans would react to news of alien contact. The program caused pandemonium. Some people even committed suicide.
Turn you to Carl Phillips at Grover's Mill.
Ladies and gentlemen, here I am. Wait a minute, something's happening. There's a jet of flame springing from the mirror and it leaps right at the advancing men. Lord, they're turning into flames.
Extremely surprised to learn that a story which has become familiar to children through the medium of comic strips should have had such an immediate and profound effect upon radio listeners.
Flying saucers have invaded our planet. The whole world is under attack. Can it survive?
The U.S. government took note of the public's reaction to the show. Since then, the government's position has been very cautious on this topic.
I don't know what the government knows about this. There isn't the government anyway. There are different pockets within the government that guard certain knowledge they have very closely. So I really don't know, but I am struck by the fact that government agencies, when they do have to speak about this, will send out the most naked disinformation. There's this level of sort of committed ignorance around this, which is, I think, extraordinary. It's as if any kind of ignorance, any kind of distortion is okay if it's in the service of not letting in certain unacceptable information.
James Forrestal was a member of the Majestic 12 group, and it was suspected that information that he had from his tenure with Majestic 12 contributed to his tragic death. He was an admiral in the Pacific Fleet during World War II, and his military accomplishments were honored by the aircraft carrier bearing his name.
In March of 1949, James Forrestal jumped out of his window at the Bethesda Naval Hospital just months after resigning his position as First Secretary of Defense.
A shocked nation mourns the tragic death of James Forrestal, America's first Secretary of Defense.
Why would a celebrated hero of World War II then commit suicide during peacetime? Was his reaction no different than those who heard War of the Worlds? What information did he have about this conspiracy that he brought to his grave? The government continues to be silent.
It's interesting, when something is attacking or challenging the ideology of a culture, then anything goes. The media can do anything. They can present distortions, lies, bring in people who don't know anything in a way that you can't do in other fields, which is really kind of interesting, which again reflects the fact that, you know, anything but that this should be true. Any weapon can be used to fight this reality in terms of how it gets represented to the public.
Ever since the middle of the century, Americans have been getting accustomed to the notion that we are not alone in the universe.
I think there's no question that the tendency to show extraterrestrial encounters as either comical or sinister does influence a certain number of people who don't know any better. There's a tendency to represent the contact with whatever you want to call this, this other, this intelligence that's reaching us, tends to represent it as frightening, as dark, taking over. We have to fight them, you know, sort of like movies like Independence Day, which show us somehow conquering this terrible alien invasion.
The public's views showed a dramatic change during the early 60s with a boom in popularity of sci-fi movies.
The public felt a sense of security by relegating alien contact to the realm of entertainment, while in the real world, the government tried to explain away UFOs with reasons like swamp gas and weather balloons.
New movies and broadcasting has proved that society's views have evolved.
The public is more open to this than the elite, you know, the general public. If I meet people in a bar or in the street or have seen something I've done on TV, they, oh yeah, we understand that. That makes sense.
Popular culture has portrayed extraterrestrials in a more intellectual light.
Individuals in the military have come forward with contact information, but no official statement has been made to confirm or deny any such evidence. Whenever such evidence is brought forward by a private citizen, the response has generally been skepticism. As a result, the public remains doubtful about the credibility of these phenomena because of insufficient information. Perhaps the only logical conclusions that we can draw are the ones that come from our own self-examination.
The kind of technology that we now have is a product essentially of the scientific revolution and the industrial revolution. And that is why I spent so much time researching the story of the Luddites. Because the Luddites were people in England at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution who said, wait, what is this technology going to do to us in particular, to our jobs, to our families, to our communities, to the environment? And they said they didn't like these new steam technologies coming in. They didn't like these new factories that were being produced because they did people out of jobs. And they said they took their torches and they took their rifles and they took their hammers and they smashed those factories. The government of England, in response to this, mounted the greatest armed force against its own citizens that it has ever done. And within about 3 or 4 years managed to put down this Luddite rebellion. And so the Industrial Revolution was allowed to proceed. These people were done out of their jobs, their communities were destroyed, the environment was black. And this is the kind of stuff that Dickens eventually wrote about. The awful price that had to be paid so that the Industrial Revolution could succeed. And so I wrote about these Luddites and told the story of what they did then, and then I tried to bring it forward 150 years to talk about the people today who are resisting the trends of modern high technology.
The fact is that the initial Big Bang of technological innovation and progress was soon followed by the marriage of the military elite to private companies, who exploited this technology and have made billions of dollars from it.
Silicon Valley produces 68 millionaires per week. It has opened up the economy to a whole new territory.
NASA Ames Research and Silicon Valley are recognizing that alien technology is now public knowledge. Yet the government is still secretive about reverse engineering that is continuing today. For example, special agents from NASA's Office of the Inspector General are investigating private entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley.
On October 5th, 1999, I did a story for the San Francisco Examiner about a meeting that was going to be held here in California between people at the NASA Ames Research Center and high-tech Silicon Valley executives. We checked it out and it turned out that they were indeed going to have this meeting. Subsequent to that story, got a call from a NASA investigator that was really concerned because at that meeting they were going to be talking about propulsion technologies, and Joe Firmager is interested in those technologies because he firmly believes that there is reverse engineering of alien technologies that have helped Silicon Valley be what it is today.
Thinking about the computer revolution and its effect on society, you would be blind not to realize how dangerous and pernicious and evil it has been. And I say that in the full recognition that there are individuals who have benefited from it, and that there are certain connections that have been made, and people love to have their email, and they love to be able to be online for this and that. But all of that is trivial. Trivial, whatever tiny personal enjoyments or benefits it has produced for individuals. The important thing about this technology is to see what it has done to the world. It's true that a few will be richer and richer, but what happens in a society, in a global society, where there are just a few rich and there are masses of poor? It is unsustainable. What I'm spelling out for you here is a scenario that inevitably leads to tragedy. And we can see it happening already. But I think it won't be more than 20 years or so before all of this collapses. Because we have these dominant government corporate forces eating up the world, pushing people aside, and attempting to create a world that is entirely artificially, entirely technology dominated. A technosphere that will eliminate the biosphere.
Alien technology causes destruction of our environment at a rapid rate. Its power is beyond what we are able to control. The destructive effects reach out to all areas of the Earth and the life that it sustains. How much time do we have before it is too late to reverse the damage from alien technology? People, disconnected from nature, abuse our ecosystem, which degrades our planet to near fatal levels. Our production of waste rivals our production of technologies that improve the human condition.
Think of this. Over there on Wall Street is the beginning process by which $4 trillion is being traded around the world every single day. $4 trillion. Now, you don't trade that stuff buying and selling around the world without having an effect, a real life effect upon the jobs and the lives and the communities of people. But the psychological effects of all of this are to distance people from the real things that they need in their lives. Love, sodality, community, poetry, dreams, all of the important things. So what I see happening is an accumulation of environmental crises melding with these economic and political crises so that the whole thing collapses. Now, it's possible that the human species will survive that. But it will do so only if it's in vastly reduced numbers, people living in small, nature-regarding communitarian societies. That is to say, tribal societies, much the way humans have lived for 90% of the time they've been on Earth. They've lived in those kinds of nature-loving, nature-regarding, small-scale societies. I think it's possible that we might get back to that. On the other hand, if the pollution If the destruction is as great as it might well be, it will threaten the existence of the human species on the Earth.
Is this the first global technological crisis of its kind? Are we living in a world where all of the technology that we depend on could stop functioning? Or does alien technology have a manifest destiny of its own to dominate the globe?
Alien technology has fragmented our system of representation. It fragments communities and alienates people from each other as it takes control. The portability of information may ultimately erode privacy. Soon, people will carry their electronic identity within their skin. This information will be read and tracked by anyone who has the equipment to do so.
The gap between those who control the technological machinery and those who are controlled by it may determine what life will be like for the next generation.
Will there be more government control over the economy? Will there be more government control over our lives?
A bold new world order.
Or is it technology that is controlling our lives? In politically underdeveloped countries, alien technology has fatal consequences. The U.S. military will not come forward with information surrounding the development of alien technology. Research continues as defense technology reaches for more sophisticated and lethal weapons. The government's priority is to maintain military and economic supremacy and keep the secrets of alien technology that created its power. The American defense system has increased its contractual research with private companies. These companies research independently and operate under total secrecy under the authority of national security.
In his 1961 farewell address to the nation, President Eisenhower warned us of the dangers caused by the very situation that our country finds itself in today.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. Akin to and largely responsible for the sweeping changes in our industrial military posture has been the technological revolution during recent decades. Yet in holding scientific research and discovery in respect, as we should, we must also be alert to the equal and opposite danger that public policy could itself become the captive of a scientific, technological elite.
The social, economic, political, and environmental consequences of the unbridled rapid growth of technology in all phases of our lives beget a fundamental question. Are we the master of or the slaves to high technology? Do we expect technology to be the solution to our problems? Perhaps we have lost the ability to reassert control over our lives. We may be so technologically dependent that any failure in the system could lead to a catastrophe like a nuclear meltdown. Can we forestall or prepare for such a catastrophe if we are unable or unwilling to address these issues now at a time of unprecedented prosperity?
Every major city in the United States is a part of only 3 power grids that supply all of our energy. These systems were built on a computer language called COBOL, Common Business Oriented Language. This computing language was developed by the U.S. Navy in 1957 under the authority of Admiral Roscoe Hillenkoetter of Harry Truman's Majestic 12. Naval officer G.M. Hopper directed the group that wrote the COBOL language. Why was the U.S. Navy involved in creating a language for use in our land-based power grids? Was the Navy's programming knowledge the only way to reverse engineer alien processors?
Socially, we are in danger of losing our sense of humanity, our sense of morality, even our sense of family and its critical role in our society. We need to assess the consequences our frenzied electronic way of life has on our planet.
Breakthroughs in medical and drug research hold out the promise of treatment, cure, and prevention of our most dreaded diseases, even cancer and AIDS. Computer technology enhances our ability to diagnose, treat, and cure illness. Magnetic resonance imaging can provide doctors with detailed 3D images of affected organs and tissues. Advances in cardiac surgery techniques continue to enable physicians and practitioners to battle the #1 killer in the United States, heart disease. Nearly 1,000 satellites orbit the Earth daily and contribute to our increased knowledge of our planet and its atmosphere and weather. Scientists deploy increasingly sophisticated weather radar. Forecasts pinpoint dangerous weather patterns today more quickly and accurately than ever before.
Good evening. Hurricane Andrew continues on its path towards the southeast Florida coast at this hour. The center of the hurricane is expected to cross the Dade-Broward area sometime between 6 and 8 a.m. tomorrow morning.
Because of this advanced technology, communities have more time to take emergency measures in the face of a violent storm. The deployment of the Hubble telescope in the mid-1990s allows man to see to the very edge of the universe. Extraordinary images of deep space astonish and electrify us. The recent World Trade Organization protests in Seattle were led by labor, environmental, humanist neo-Luddites, and fringe groups focused on economic and environmental issues. Yet pollution and waste have already done substantial damage. Ironically, a comparatively low-tech alternative to fossil fuel and uranium is wind power. In some regions, it provides clean, reliable energy which could significantly reduce our reliance on imported oil, coal, or nuclear power. Unfortunately, the nuclear power industry is encouraged to develop through government subsidies several times the amount that solar or wind power development will ever receive. With the internet eclipsing 1 billion pages and counting, today's e-revolution is spurring an unprecedented global economic boom. E-commerce is expected to top several $1 trillion in the next few years. Alan Greenspan, chairman of the Federal Reserve, pointed out the critical role of high technology in the growth and reshaping of our economy and society.
There are few signs to date of slowing in the pace of innovation and the spread of our newer technologies that, as I have indicated in previous testimonies, have been at the root of our extraordinarily impressive productivity improvement. What is uncertain is the future pace of the application of these innovations, because it is this pace that governs the rate of change in productivity and economic potential.
Since nearly any human being can link up individually to the rest of the world, the internet may be the greatest mechanism of democracy ever made. Yet with such unlimited worldwide access to each other, how will our lives be affected? Just in the last few months, serious concerns over privacy and safety on the net have spurred government and corporate responses to arrest and prosecute hackers and other criminals. We may never find definite answers to the mysteries of alien technologies, but because of mankind's discovery and development of extraterrestrial tools, humanity has raced generations beyond our time, closer to our own enlightenment, or destruction, as a species.
Furthermore, the rapid pace of technological change has only magnified these problems. So where does it all end? The disparity between the rich and poor nations and individuals continues to grow. The destruction of the rainforests and other habitat, nuclear proliferation, biological weapons, global warming, and ozone depletion show the immediate and direct consequences of technology gone amok. America is the largest arms merchant in the world. This undermines our credibility as a nation of peace. Recent wars in Iraq and Yugoslavia also show the trend toward high-tech electronic warfare, where drones, cruise missiles, and global positioning satellites enable the Pentagon to wage truly impersonal surgical war. Since the Big Bang of technology in the mid-20th century, we have seen the application and misapplication of this reverse-engineered alien technology in every aspect of our lives. We must raise our consciousness on a personal, emotional, global, and even spiritual level. We need to demystify and emasculate the iconography of technology. Maybe we can think and act less selfishly, with a greater sense of community, both locally and globally. Collectively, we can insist that our government, major corporations, academia, and the military seriously consider the consequences of our technological revolution. As citizens, we must insist our leaders address these issues both here and abroad. Globally, the U.S., as the world's sole superpower, must take the lead in shaping and applying high technology. America and its allies must press for a more thoughtful, slower approach to technological change. The Internet is the latest and perhaps an especially sinister example of high technology being used to foster racism, bigotry, and hatred. Our power is not through one person or group or nation. Collectively, we as human beings must fight against complacency, indifference, and ignorance. The world is shrinking every day, and we must act now to save our own humanity. The infinite power of the human mind and spirit can help us harness technology while protecting and healing ourselves and Mother Earth. Otherwise, we may eventually be doomed to nuclear, biological, or technological oblivion.
In December 1915, the New York Times reported that the inventor Nikola Tesla had filed patent applications on the essential parts of a machine, possibilities of which test a layman's imagination and promise a parallel of Thor shooting thunderbolts from the sky to punish those who had angered the gods. Suffice it to say that the invention will go through space with the speed of 300 miles per second, a manless ship without propelling engine or wings, sent by electricity to any desired point on the globe on its errand of destruction, if destruction its manipulator wishes to effect. It is not a time, said Dr. Tesla, to go into the details of this thing. It is founded upon a principle that means great things in peace. It can be used for great things in war. But I repeat, this is no time to talk of such things. Nikola Tesla told the writer that he stands ready to divulge to the United States government the secret of his teleforce, with which he said airplane motors would be melted at a distance of 250 miles away. And who remembers when the Soviets launched a giant mirror into space? It was to have the luminescence of 10 moons and was said to be used to heat polar regions for agriculture. The mirror seemed to fail, however, and they say it burnt up in the atmosphere. HAARP has the ability to generate such a mirror effect by causing a plasma cloud in the ionosphere that can direct solar radiation to desired targets. I received a report that HAARP was tested as a meteor deflection shield. It seems a meteor was directed straight towards the facility. Could we have the ability to hurl meteors at our own planet with such precision? I looked deeper and found that the Anchorage Daily News reported such an event. A meteor struck the ionosphere, the clouds dispersed at 1,000 miles per hour, and then a sonic boom. Many of the people in Anchorage thought it was the end of the world and sought refuge in their basements. And 3 hours later, an earthquake struck.
But over all those years, only the name changed. The positions remained the same. By 1955, it became obvious that the aliens had deceived Eisenhower and had broken the treaty. Mutilated humans, yes, mutilated humans, were being found along with mutilated animals, and yes, mutilated animals, and those of you who doubt that this is taking place should leave your job, should leave your home, should do whatever you have to do, and go look for yourself, because it's important that you know it and that you believe it. These things were being found all across the United States. It was suspected that the aliens were not submitting a complete list of human contacts and abductees to MJ-12, and it was suspected that not all abductees had been returned, and this has been verified. The Soviet Union was suspected of interacting with them, and this proved also to be true. It was learned that the aliens had been and were then manipulating masses of people through secret societies, witchcraft, magic, the occult, and religion. After several Air Force combat air engagements with alien craft, it also became apparent that our weapons were no match against theirs. In November of 1955, NSC 5412/2 was issued, establishing a study committee to explore all factors which are involved in the making and implementing of foreign policy in the nuclear age. This, again, was only a blanket of snow that covered the real subject of study, which was the alien question. For, in fact, 5412/2 had, as I told you earlier, been written in 1954, when NSC 5410 and 5411 was written, and 5411 by secret executive memorandum in 1954. The study group was commissioned to examine all the facts, evidence, lies, and deception and discover the truth of the alien question. NSC 54/2 was only a cover that had become necessary when the press began inquiring as to the purpose of regular meetings of such important men. When the press asked Gordon Dean, somewhere near the end of 1954, why they were meeting and what they were studying, Gordon Dean says, "As of yet, we have no direction, but we're working on it." It then became necessary to find a direction and find a reason for these meetings, and that's exactly what they did. The first meetings began in 1954 and were called the Quantico meetings because they met at the Quantico Marine Base. See, one thing I knew, ladies and gentlemen, I know who they are. I know what they were called. All I had to do was find out who belonged to those names. And it's impossible to hold meetings of 36 prominent men secret over such a long period of time. The study actually lasted 3 years, not forever. It was a 3-year study, period. A study group was made up of 35 members of the Council on Foreign Relations secret scholars known as the Jason Society or the Jason Scholars. Dr. Edward Teller was invited to participate. Dr. Zbigniew Brzezinski was the study director for the first 18 months. Dr. Henry Kissinger was chosen as the group study director for the second 18 months, beginning in November of 1955. Nelson Rockefeller was a frequent visitor during the study. I'm going to read you the study group members now. For those of you who know who these people are, you're going to be amazed. Those of you who do not, I advise that you purchase a copy of my text, which will be on sale the minute that I finish my last word. And research everything that I'm telling you, and your own research will tell you that I am telling you the truth, and I don't have to do that. You see, I'm a witness. I'm not a ufologist, and I'm not by profession a researcher. I'm doing this because I want the Constitution put back where it belongs. The study group members were Gordon Dean, chairman, one of the most powerful men in the United States at that time. Dr. Zbigniew Brzezinski, study director for the first phase. Dr. Henry Kissinger, study director for the second phase. Dr. Edward Teller represented the scientific community. Major General Richard C. Lindsay, Hanson W. Baldwin, Lloyd V. Berkner, Frank C. Nash, Paul H. Nitze, Charles P. Noyes, Frank Pace Jr., James A. Perkins, Don K. Price, David Rockefeller, Oscar M. Rubhausen, Lieutenant General James M. Gavin, Carl P. Haskins, James T. Hill Jr., Joseph E. Johnson, Mervyn J. Kelly, Frank Altschul, Hamilton Fish Armstrong, Major General James McCormick Jr., Robert R. Bowie, McGeorge Bundy, William A. M. Burden, John C. Campbell, Thomas K. Findletter, George S. Franklin Jr., I. Rabbi, Roswell L. Gilpatrick, N. E. Hallaby, General Walter Bedell Smith, called Beadle, Henry DeWolf Smythe, Shields Warren, Carol L. Wilson, and Arnold Wolfers. Now, these aren't bad guys. They were a study group. And the first MJ-12 was not made up of bad guys. They were made up of concerned Americans. What happened later became bad. The yanking of power away from the president, the formation of a secret government, the sale of drugs to the American people, etc., etc., etc. And I'm going to cover most of those things before I'm finished.
Do you see the border? Do you see the purplish color that's made by the projection on the screen? Do you see that you can see sky through the back of the projection? You can see that it's not in space. You do see that that is not in space, right?
During the Watergate investigation, it was discovered that there was a plan originated in the White House to surface a submarine off the coast of Cuba and paint the second coming of Christ over the island of Cuba using holograms. Which is well within our technology today. The idea was that since there is a large Catholic population in Cuba, they would be so upset by this vision that this would saturate the communication channels, the telephone system in Cuba, long enough for an invasion to take place.
How interesting. I never heard of that.
Well, I think that's a classic in psychological warfare, but that kind of manipulation is well understood, and I have personally investigated several apparently genuine UFO cases where there was in fact a manipulation. My conclusion, the conclusion of scientists working with me, was that there was in fact a manipulation taking place, and that it was not a hoax on the part of the witnesses, but a hoax on the part of somebody much better organized than them.
Here in Carcassonne, I suppose this is a real copy of Middle-Age stuff here, and what we see here, there he is, the lizard. Oh, look at the lizard. They had lizards in the Middle Ages? What is this? There's another one. In blue. What is this?
Básicamente en eso hemos sido convocados para la realización del...
Bueno, básicamente en eso hemos sido convocados para la realización del... Bueno, básicamente en eso hemos sido convocados para la realización del...
muestreo, el traslado de las muestras al laboratorio de la universidad.
Bueno, básicamente en eso hemos sido convocados para la realización.
Other UFO researchers, you've written many authoritative books, and yet your perspective on the UFO issue seems rather unique in the sense that you don't seem to be jumping on the extraterrestrial visitors bandwagon.
That's what was the main point of disagreement with Steven Spielberg. When I met Steven Spielberg, he was about halfway through filming Close Encounters, and we had a long discussion about what UFOs could be. And of course, for him, the main point of the movie was entertainment, and it was appropriate for the UFOs to be extraterrestrial visitors. I think that from my own point of view, I'm going to be very disappointed if UFOs turn out to be nothing more than visitors from another planet, because I think they could be something much more interesting.
Something from another dimension of space or time?
I think what the UFO phenomenon is teaching us is that we don't understand time and space. Here are objects, I think we have to call them objects, that are physical, that interact with the environment, that cause effects on the witnesses, on the psychology and the physiology of the witnesses, and leave traces on the ground, and yet are capable of, appear to be capable of manipulating time and space in ways that go beyond what our physics understands today.
In your books, particularly your most recent book, Messengers of Deception, which is many years old, you suggest that UFOs are deliberately trying to manipulate our subconscious mind, to create a mythology in our culture about themselves, which is one of the reasons that they're both physical and concrete, yet very elusive at the same time. Do you still feel that way?
I think to answer that, I'm not trying to evade your question, but to answer that, you have to step back, a little bit farther. What we know today about the UFO phenomenon is considerably more than we knew 20 years ago or 10 years ago. And we have to understand it at three different levels. And the first level is the physical level. And all we can say about UFOs at the physical level is that it's a lot of energy in a small space. In the space of this, if we could take the energy of a nuclear reactor and contain it within this studio, for example, you'd have something that would approximate what a UFO does. It's a lot of energy in a small space, emitted through light energy and through pulsed microwave energy. The second level is what happens to witnesses, what would happen to you and me if we were close to that source of energy. And again, now we're beginning to understand the physiological and the psychological correlations of a close encounter.
Yes.
And those have to do with a loss of the sense of space, loss of orientation. I've had witnesses tell me we were driving north when everybody knows they were driving south.
Mm-hmm.
They were disoriented at the time. Loss of a sense of time, people thinking that only 10 minutes went by and 3 hours went by. Very often effects on the skin, sunburns, I think that was shown in close encounters.
Yes.
Effects on the eyes, going from conjunctivitis to blindness, to temporary blindness in some cases.
And sometimes you've mentioned people have actually been healed of diseases.
There have been cases where after a UFO close encounter, it seems that the healing process had been sped up. Now there are known techniques now using electromagnetic radiation that will heal the fractures, for example, or will heal superficial wounds on the skin, but nothing that would heal as fast as the reported effects.
Yeah.
So we're beginning to understand at least the descriptions, the symptoms of the exposure to whatever UFO is. And then there is a third level, which is where the level I was addressing in Messengers of Deception, which is a social level.
The impact on our culture.
Yes, and the impact on our belief systems. And at that level, and that's something that's very difficult to convey to the believers in UFOs, the believers in little green men from space, that at that level it really doesn't matter whether UFOs are real or not. If enough people believe that something is real, then it is real in its effects.
In terms of its social reality.
In terms of the social reality, in terms of what people act according to their beliefs.
Yeah.
And that opens a question of, really at two levels, could the UFO phenomenon be manipulating us? Could it be a teaching system of some sort? Perhaps something that we are creating ourselves, perhaps a series of images that we are projecting. I think Carl Jung came very close to expressing that idea in one of his books. Or could it be manipulated purposely by people who have the technology to simulate UFO sightings? And people say, well, of course not. Who would do a thing like that? Well, I would remind you that during the Watergate investigation, it was discovered that there was a plan originated in the White House to surface a submarine off the coast of Cuba and paint the Second Coming of Christ over the island of Cuba using holograms. Which is well within our technology today. The idea was that since there is a large Catholic population in Cuba, they would be so upset by this vision that this would saturate the communication channels, the telephone system in Cuba, long enough for an invasion to take place.
How interesting. I'd never heard of that.
Well, I think that's a classic in psychological warfare, but that kind of manipulation is well understood, and I have personally investigated several apparently genuine UFO cases where there was in fact a manipulation. My conclusion, the conclusion of scientists working with me, was that there was in fact a manipulation taking place, and that it was not a hoax on the part of the witnesses, but a hoax on the part of somebody much better organized than...
So there are possibly all of these levels going on simultaneously.
Today, with the current technology, that would be possible. One of my interests, as you know, has been to look at ancient sightings, old sightings before World War II, for example, when there is really no confusion with modern technology. And if people described, say, in 1925 or in 1825, a disc flying through the air, then it can only have been very, very few phenomena could have produced it.
And there have been some well-documented sightings going back to the 19th century, for example.
There was, starting in 1896 and going into the spring of 1897, there was a remarkable wave of sightings of airships. Those were described as oval objects flying through the sky with lights on them. And of course, the people in those days could only compare it to dirigibles, could only compare them to airships. And those objects were capable of doing all the things that UFOs do today, including taking off very quickly and making 90-degree turns and landing and occupants coming out of them. And if nothing else, I think this is part of our folklore. This is something that we should be studying as part of our folklore.
Bright object, just basically hovering over Las Vegas, 5:30 p.m. Cylindrical object, a craft. We believe it could.
That's common ice and getting struck by some object. Watch this. That's got to be my all-time favorite. I love you guys. God bless you. One more time. Common ice and getting struck by an object. It's still the mystery of the world, ain't it? We love you, friends. God bless. Hug the kids, hug the wife. Yo, Marine.
Say hi. Parece muito lindo os sóis. Ali, ó. Ali tem os sóis. Ali tem outro. Gente, eu tô mostrando, ó. Um ali e outro ali, ó. Vocês acham que vocês só tem um só aqui em Nova York? Ali, ó. Um. Nós não estamos mentindo, é verdade.
Food soon. Tea time soon. Yeah. I'll get you a bib in a minute. They're ready, please. You Well, set them out. Put it for 5 and 3 hours, so I'm going to give it now at 6. But If you give it the earlier you give it in, the then earlier do the next one. one is. Yeah, and then we can No, I'll get it in a minute. Yeah, look, still, it's shining in the sun.
Aliens are coming. Are you prepared?
Holy shit. Holy shit. Oh, you're just getting funny.
Keep recording.
Oh man, I saw something there, Verna.
Keep recording.
Jesus.
Watching all the video?
Yeah. Holy shit's black now. Holy. That's stardust for sure, guaranteed. Holy shit.
See, maybe it's a satellite.
Погоди. Я тебе отвечаю, там что-то летало. Во-во-во. Вау. Офигенно. What the fuck? Офигеть! РЛО прям над нашим сраным городом. Блин, я знал, что они существуют. Слушай, они как будто разговаривают, да? Вообще клево. Блин. Офигеть. Где они? Все, пропали.
Hello, Sunsflare here. It is March 11th, 2012. We are looking at the SDO images of the sun from today using the AIA 171 filter and the AIA 304 filter. And my question to you is, are you seeing this? What is going on? We have a filament eruption going over what appears to be a black spherical anomaly with a twister tether. I have no idea what this is. I wanted to put the video out, take a better look at it, but just get it out there as quick as I could so everyone could take a look. I will tell you that it shows up better on the AIA 171, and that's with the gamma increased. If you pull the gamma back to the stock image, you don't see it as much, but it caught my eye to play with the filter, and when you increase the gamma, it's very interesting with that twister and the filament going over the black spherical anomaly. It is not affected. If that was something in the plasma field, it's strange that it would definitely be affected by the filament. So I don't know what this is. I want to look at it further. If you have any ideas, let me know.
My Leica A camera with me, then suddenly I saw a flying saucer. It had no wings, absolutely none. I took a photo and wound on the film, but it was already directly over me. Then I took a second photo, and I could see it was a flying saucer.
Ed was devastated by what he felt was the theft of his saucer.
UFO, where did you go? Will you be back? I don't know. Twinkling, twinkling, flying high, like an ashtray in the sky.
Ed would get his own back later, but in the meantime, the Germans had a flying saucer.
It actually flew and flew pretty well.
This is what the German saucer looked like. It was based on the flying saucer principle, the effect discovered by Henry Coanda, whereby the ship created an area of low pressure above it and literally sucked itself into the air. But it combined this with other new technologies, such as the helicopter and the jet engine. It was fast, versatile, and could potentially carry a heavy payload of bombs underneath. But perhaps most important in a country which had lost so many runways to Allied bombing, it could take off vertically.
These saucers worked in one sense almost like a helicopter in that they had rotating vanes. The vanes would rotate underneath the saucer and were powered by a jet, the same jet that moved the saucer forward, would be directed up to spinning these vanes to give it lift.
They were to be used as a bomber. Every machine built in those years was a war weapon. What was to be the final battle of the Third Reich.
According to Mercer, an increasingly desperate and deluded Hitler plotted to use his secret new weapons in a devastating attack on New York.
I was allowed 2 times to photograph at night. As we sat inside the car, we saw all of a sudden to the north, above the meadow, out of nowhere, a fire-red disc, about as large as a headlight.
And then what happened?
And then it suddenly disappeared. Then there was a short pause, after which, at the same place again, appeared all of a sudden a silvery white ball. Then there was another pause, and then the same ball appeared again. It flew toward us, got larger and larger, then shrunk, collapsed, and then, like magic, it was gone. And best of all, it looked like a shower of sparks.
In all, over 30 other witnesses corroborate Maya's testimony. The contacts continue at a furious pace, sometimes 2 or 3 a week. Maya claims to have had over 130 meetings. He has taken hundreds of photographs and has over 3,000 pages of notes.
For a long time, we've had an urge to contact someone who sincerely wants to be helpful in our mission. Here and there, we open such contacts with inhabitants of different worlds, but only when they have developed enough to become rational, thinking beings. Then we prepare them for the thought that they are not the only rational, thinking beings in the universe.
Britt questions Calliope, Maya's wife, whose nickname is Poppy.
Poppy, how long have you and Billy been married?
Now, 16 years.
And you were married in Greece?
Yes.
Uh-huh. What did you think when Billy first told you about these experiences?
Her English shaky, Poppy reverts to German.
Ja. Ein bisschen schwierig im Anfang gewesen. It was difficult at the beginning. Weil erst einmal
Because she never knows anything about this case. Oh, she didn't know?
No.
When did she find out?
Ich habe nicht rausgefunden.
She says Billy takes a long time that her tell her something from the UFO. And then how did you feel about it?
Beunruhigt einerseits, weil
And she was thinking why this happened all to me.
Hat mir ja schon erzählt.
Billy shows her every time the picture that he takes, and so she was knowing about from the picture from the UFO. But she was very critical about this case and asked him some questions about all this case, and it was very difficult for Bobby. Were there times when you just had it up to here and you couldn't take any more? She never was thinking to leaving this whole case, but she was crying and fighting against Billy and against the whole case.
At one point, Poppy admits, she was so fed up she burned half the photographs.
Today the feeling is other because she knows very well about the whole case and things about the Pleiadians, and this is very important for her.
Listen here.
Wow, you recorded that here?
My wife recorded this one here, and in the meantime, I've been there down very standingly with the other recorder.
You had another recorder down
Yes.
there. How high was the ship above you?
About 60 meters.
60 meters. How far would you estimate it is from here
Oh.
down there today?
I think some 300 meters.
The sounds bear no resemblance to anything Stevens has heard before. Maya gives him both tapes for analysis.
Military professors that used to be in war colleges and the like are training people like ex-Russian KGB and Spetsnaz people right here on American soil. I've seen it with my own 2 eyes, along with other people, other geologists. By the way, I'm still a geologist, still do geological survey work. However, I don't work for the government anymore. I took my security clearance and all my government stuff and cut it up and sent it back to the, pardon my French, SOBs. When I found out that a number of these 131 deep underground military bases are being used to subvert the Constitution of these United States and its people, I says, that is enough. I can't possibly be connected. Oh, well, Mr. Schneider, you can't quit, they said. Well, I says, yes, I can. I'm an individual, I'm going to quit, and I'm walking off the job. And he says, so I got arrested and casually told, well, you got to finish a job. And so I caved into that part, and I finished 3 weeks, and then at that time my father was dying, and I was allowed home, and I never went back for my paychecks. Don't intend to either. These people are beginning to show signs of being our utmost enemy. I'm talking about military people now engaged in training foreign troops on American soil, clearly against the Bill of Rights and the U.S. Constitution. It's why we formed a government, why our forefathers formed a government, a republic of these United States in the first place, way back 200 plus years ago. Because the drawing and quartering of soldiers, taxation without representation, law by edict, otherwise known as today's version, executive order, among other things. The very reasons that we became, in quote, free, a free republic, a free society, possibly one of the greatest nations to ever be a nation on this earth, were instilled in our founding fathers that are now so far away from the people now running our federal government structure. So I'm here today to touch upon a number of subjects. One being that these underground bases are roughly over 3 of them per state. There's now, instead of 12 prison camps, there's 39. That's almost 1 per state. They're building 2 prison camps every 7 months. They're building 2 underground military bases every year. Each one of these military bases, by the way, these underground military bases, they cost somewhere between $17 and $26 billion. They employ 1,800 to 10,000 workers each, in varying grades of skill.
Union Banking Corporation was liquidated by the U.S. government, and Prescott Bush received $1.5 million for his holdings in his Nazi business, and that was the beginning of the Bush family fortune for all intents and purposes. George Bush takes his inspiration from what he learned in Skull and Bones and from the Thule Society that Hitler and Goebbels and Goring cut their teeth in, Bohemian Grove, these evil organizations that perpetrate the ugly things that these criminals are doing to this country, for which they must be held accountable.
They are the most violent, dirtiest people on the face of the earth. Somewhere Americans are going to have to take their country back and start finding out who are these people. Who are these people we call our representatives, the Bushes. George Bush, the president, his father, went around the country talking about a new world order. The people who are running this country from behind the scenes do not care a thing about Americans or bloodshed anywhere.
You were both in Skull and Bones, the secret society.
And when I first came across this, I thought it was crazy. I thought it was insane until I realized that it was absolutely real. I want you to also bear in mind, ladies and gentlemen, that it was not too long ago, and it really wasn't too long ago, that if you mentioned to someone else that in a few years man would be flying through our own atmosphere, you would have been laughed at, ostracized, and probably kicked out of town. Then not long after that, when we did have aircraft and were carrying passengers flew through the air, if you had suggested to your neighbor that in a few years a man would be walking on the moon, you would have been laughed at, ridiculed, and maybe run out of town. Literally, when we put a man on the moon is when I realized that nothing is impossible. Nothing ever again can be impossible. The next most important thing that happened after they found E.B. it came a few years later. E.B. became ill, and they tried to save him. They were unsuccessful. They didn't know how to go about it. But in an attempt to save him, and also in an attempt to gain favor with this technologically superior race, they began broadcasting out into space for help. We have one of your people here who crashed in one of your ships. We're trying to save his life. He's dying. Please help us save his life. By doing that, they hoped, number one, to make contact, number two, to make friendly contact, number three, that the aliens would see us as a benevolent people trying to help one of theirs and would not attempt to destroy us or hurt us. Because we realized that their technology was so far ahead of ours that in any military confrontation of any kind, we would have had no chance whatsoever. And basically that is still true today. What should give you good feelings is that if the aliens wanted to, they could have done anything that they wished to us many, many years ago, and they have not done that. So I see that as good. Hopeful. I see it pregnant with all kinds of hope and possibilities for the future. Because we know as the human race, what we usually do to an inferior culture if we're technologically superior is usually not that good. So there is a great deal of hope. There's a great deal of promise in that. E.B. died in June of 1952. As of the time of E.B.'s death, we had not had any answer to the message that we had sent out into space. The movie that you saw, called E.T., is the story of E.B. They have changed some things around to make it more palatable to you. The beginning of the story, he's running around in the desert. He's lost. The government is chasing him. In the real story, the government caught him.
We have developed anti-gravity. I was recruited way after they got it for the first time because I came up with a method of powering a saucer craft using an ionized air plasma, which I'll explain to you later. In that program, under Dr. Teller, I was sent down to Australia. And so I have been privy to things you would never see. You would never, ever see. And I'm going to show you some of those things as best I could recreate them today so that you'll understand that mankind has, on his own accord, done some of this. Now, before the alien card was played or begun in 1947, it was kicked around in Washington that in addition to removing the noise level, after World War II was over, there was going to have to be some sort of a plan devised to stop warfare. We could not afford, the human race could not afford another warfare with the technology at the stage it was. Any of you that have brothers and sisters, as children, you can remember when you were in your room fighting at night, probably. And your dad said, "Stop, or I'm coming in with the belt." That he meant business, yeah, probably, until you heard the knock at the door. And when the door ripped open and there was the 8-foot wide belt with meat cleavers on it and said, "I'm going to kill you," you knew you were friends again. You and your brother or sister were friends. And, "Hey, Dad, no problem." We are that way. Russian, Chinese, American, Canadian. We are the fighting siblings, all humans. Well, majority of us anyway. To get us together long enough to try peace, to get along in harmony, it was reasoned that they could not coerce us from any philosophical or political point. They could not force us with a dictatorship. So they were going to fool us into thinking we were being invaded, without knowing that we had aliens at the time. The best laid plans go astray. In 1947, there was a crash. And there were alien beings on that crash. Even though I wasn't there, I'm convinced from what I was shown inside the organization. Certainly there were some technologies, and probably still are some remaining, that we were not able to back engineer.
Sightings by Gemini, Apollo, and Skylab astronauts. The first sighting occurred during Gemini 4 in June of 1965. Astronaut Jim McDivitt suddenly spotted a cylindrical object with arms and antenna. And when seen against the day sky, it appeared white or silvery. The object then appeared to be moving toward the craft. Suddenly, they lost sight of it. During the sighting, the astronauts were able to take these photographs and movie films of the UFO. Gemini 5, later that year, after 3 days and 5 hours into their mission, were contacted by Houston Control Center, advising the astronauts that Houston had picked up and was tracking another object, which was pacing Gemini across the entire United States. They estimated the UFO between 2,000 to 10,000 yards from the craft, and as large as the Gemini craft itself. Because of the limitations of viewing area aboard their capsule, no visual contact was made. Radar continued to track the object until they passed the Ascension Islands in the Atlantic. It then disappeared. Gemini 10 crew, Collins and Young, picked up objects traveling together in orbit. A positive identification has to date not been made.
Tells us that we are dealing with beings who have anywhere from 1,000 to 1 million to 10 million to 1 billion years advancement in technology on us. So you've got to figure that look what happened in the last 100 years. We have the Wright brothers at the turn of the century taking off in basically a fabric and wood aircraft. By 1969, we have lunar expeditions. In the year 2004, we have massive airplanes being built out of alloys and graphite, and this big ship that Airbus is building, the new Boeing plane. So in 100 years, from fabric and wood, we've come to, advanced metallurgy, fuel use, and propulsion in just 100 years. Imagine what a culture could accomplish in 1,000 years, or 10,000 years, or 1 million years, or 1 billion years. It's not inconceivable that you have intelligently manufactured and controlled machines that can not only traverse great distances in space by mastering gravity and the time-space continuum, but also the interdimensional travel that might be possible. Many theories now purport that there were not only 4 dimensions at the creation of the entire multiverse 14 billion years ago at the time of the Big Bang. There were 11, maybe as many as 21 dimensions. So some of these beings may be coming from an extra dimensional place. And what it says is that these technologies have been harnessed, and that it's possible to use other fuels that don't rely just on simple combustion. And there are many theories. Some theories are that the military already knows about these forms of propulsion and lighter than air vehicles, or metals that can be vibrated to a certain point where they become light waves, photons. But they're not telling us. They're not going to reveal that, obviously, to us. and we just have to keep the search going. So I think that it's incumbent on us as a race on this planet to begin to find alternatives to the fossil fuels, but we're just not doing it fast enough.
It's probably been the greatest and most successful cover-up in the history of the world. UFOs are as real as the airplanes that fly over your head. That is my unequivocal conclusion.
Oh my God.
We've had a remarkable amount of patience, and your biggest tests are coming, because as more and more of this information comes out, more and more people are going to want to ask you, who they thought were crazy, what the hell's going on? They're going to want to know. And you're going to have to try, in a very calm manner, explain it to them, even though you yourselves are going to have all the butterflies. You're going to be wondering, how the hell am I going to even deal with this? Because you have some background information. Now, this ET component is really about us. It is our destiny to travel the stars. It is our destiny to continue to move out and colonize space, especially our own solar system. It is not our destiny to be killed by vaccines and war. You will have to make those choices. My choices are already made. Okay? My decisions are clear. I am the father of 5 children. There is no way I'm going to back down and I'm going to sell them into slavery. Never going to happen. Okay? You need to make your own choices. Okay. I once asked Phaseus, one of the Andromedans, who has since crossed over, what was to become of us? Some of this may be a review for some of you. What was to become of us? What was going to happen to our race, to our civilization? And he just looked at me and he said, this is how we see you. Responsible freedom of self-determination, becoming truly self-confident and free, to unconditionally be responsible for oneself without being coerced to accept some higher authority. In our galaxy, the more advanced the civilizations have become in the center of the galaxy, the riffraff had to start moving out to the outskirts of the galaxy. The riffraff. It's just like Star Wars. Okay? We are in the boonies, and that's why we have some riffraff here. We're not the only planetary race that is having problems with the riffraff. Okay? But what's unique about us is that genetically we are considered, to the Andromedan race, genetic royalty. And I have been saying this since day one. We are extremely unique. And it's because of that uniqueness we have enormous strength. We have enormous capacity for emotions. We have enormous intent and drive to not only to survive, but to create. What we lack is faith in ourselves.
What color were the lights? What shape was the craft? Where did it go? Where did it come from? And scientific equipment of every sort has been focused on the UFO phenomenon for 50 years. And many groups like MUFON and others claim that the scientific approach is the only approach we should use, and it's the only way we're going to get answers. And my friends, I can challenge every one of them, and I have to their faces, to tell me after 50 years of scientific investigation, have you learned who these creatures are, where they come from, or why they're here? Is there anyone who has learned this with the scientific approach that you know of? MUFON itself has not been able to give me one reply. I spoke at the MUFON International Symposium this summer and I made the same challenge, and all I got was silence. Science is not going to penetrate this. It is not capable, as it is now, to penetrate what is going on, because this is above the three-dimensional scientific paradigm that science holds on to as if it were a holy crusade to not move past it. And we have to move past it if we're going to make any headway. The UFO community resisted the abduction reports more vigorously than anyone in the beginning. Did you know that? Yeah. Remember the first few reports? This can't be. Yes, people can see craft, but certainly they're not seeing anybody in them. They're obviously empty. There's nobody flying them. And if anyone claimed to have actually seen an alien or had an encounter, they were immediately written off by the UFO community as being crackpots and loonies. Nobody has encounters. They resisted vigorously. And then, pushed by evidence as case after case began to come forward, grumblingly, the UFO community said, okay, maybe there is somebody in those ships. Okay, maybe occasionally one of them might get out of the ship. Maybe every now and then some random witness might accidentally see one of these little creatures out taking soil samples or picking some flowers or gathering some water from the reservoir, but no, it's not a common event. Even Bud Hopkins, as recently as the early 1980s, was saying, all right, people may be getting abducted at some point, but it only happens once. It's that random and rare. There was no idea, even among the leading researcher in the field, that it was a recurrent situation. He would accept one report, but if the person said they came back, he'd say out of the office. Because that was where the research stood. It was conservative, it was resistant to change, and Bud is the first to admit he was pushed to change by the evidence, and he waited until it was overwhelming before he would change. There are some people who have been forced to change much faster, Ms. Bartlett being one of these, because of living in the center of an invasion area during the mid-80s when things changed, and we're going to talk about when things changed and why they changed.
And built by the German AEG company in 1944. The engine being called the Kohler converter. This engine was designed so that it needed a relatively small amount of energy to activate it. This energy coming from an accumulator or battery. After a short time, the Kohler converter built up sufficient energy transformed from the gravitational field of the Earth . This is a diagram of the Kohler converter, and this is a photograph of the actual converter, operating on a principle of genius simplicity. This is a preliminary sketch of the Hanibu 2. The cockpit here is outlined in red. With a circular driving unit beneath, outlined in purple. With adjacent space for people or soldiers. This machine was built somewhat like a modern ship.
What it gave us was a concrete focus for all kinds of space research.
The scientific community felt strongly that the signal should not belong to anyone. And while they desperately needed better telescopes, most scientists wanted to avoid the politics of where the money came from, the US, the UN, or elsewhere. Finally, on the 13th of October 2001, Congress decided the matter with a huge reallocation of funds for extraterrestrial research.
The money came from three bodies: NASA, the military, and the National Science Foundation. And it amounted to about $20 billion each year for 10 years. What it covered was space exploration, manned and unmanned, a new telescope program, defense systems, and genetic engineering.
It was inevitable that genetic engineering would become a part of the new initiative. If human beings were ever going to travel across the galaxy, they would have to live beyond their natural lifespan. To achieve this, it would be necessary to create humans that had been biologically modified. At a secret conference in November 2001, a group representing a range of disciplines, science, the arts, religion, philosophy, and the military, debated the moral and pragmatic implications of making contact with aliens.
We need to make plans for lots of different strategies, defusing situations, protecting ourselves, as paranoid as it sounds.
It's a presumably cultured species of some sort. We've never found one before. We have never had the need to communicate with one before. And the goal is to find these people and communicate with them and find out something about their mode of intelligence and their mode of living their lives.
Like the media, they too began to speculate on the appearance of the aliens. But government officials knew their efforts to decode the extraterrestrial message would be wasted without new telescopes that could receive a much clearer signal.
They asked us what we wanted, and we said 73 100-meter telescopes, all grouped together, which is an extraordinary collecting area, and we got it. It was like Christmas. Prior to 1997 was only a few $1 million a year. It was just an extraordinary turnaround.
By the spring of 2002, the new telescope building program, which continues to this day, had begun. The European Union now also began construction of a telescope, as did Japan's massive Sekai Corporation. But these projects paled beside the US effort. And yet, across America, opposition was growing.
Pay enough tax as it is already just to keep the economy going. I just want to see some results.
You're listening to The Jack Bingley Show. Now, who's our next caller?
Radio stations reported a flood of calls, some supportive, but many angry about the high taxes needed to build telescopes.
See, what I wonder is how ordinary people are supposed to know.
Just how stupid do they think we are? There hasn't been one shred of hard evidence to prove that these aliens actually exist, you know? Yet, we're supposed to
and the government knows it. If you want to know what the government is really up to, just look at history.
What they're saying is that this air spike gadget, which is out in front of this little ship, which is shaped kind of like a little pill, the little spike sticks out, and then there's a little sting on the end. When the sting's not in operation, they say you've got a conical shock wave, and when the sting is in operation, it operating at something like 35 megawatts power, and it's a plasma arc torch on the end of the sting, that it creates a parabolic wave which reduces the pressure behind it and reduces the heat transfer problems that are associated with that kind of high velocity. But it's just a theory. It's been, they tested it in a wind tunnel, but they're not going to use it.
The second page of this, which shows the diagram, discusses for speeds above Mach 1, the vehicle would rely on a magneto-hydrodynamic fan engine. The lens-shaped craft would have an interior rectifying antenna to absorb pulsed, focused microwave power on the outside of the vehicle to ionize air forced to the rim of the craft by the air spike. The rectennas, which they like to call it, also would pulse electric power through the ionized air, and in conjunction with two superconducting magnets ringing the craft, accelerate the air aft past the vehicle. According to Mirabo, which is the scientist involved in this wonderful device, this drive system also tends to eliminate sonic booms. Gee, just like what, I wonder? By eliminating pressure discontinuities, so the vehicle is silent but very bright in hypersonic operation. So we have a lens-shaped, glowing object that is silent in flight that he's speculating that someday we might have.
Yes, and what's interesting is the technology's wrong for that kind of propulsion, and they're making it look like that this is just on the horizon. Only 40-something years after the one I saw that didn't make a sonic boom, did not have an air spike gadget on it, and went between 9,000, possibly 25,000 miles per hour in 3 seconds. Now, it did 290-degree turns at above 200 miles per hour, absolutely square turns.
Лиц. Сегодня мы можем предположить, что имел в виду гросс-адмирал. Не так давно в Антарктиде под километровым слоем льда обнаружены огромные озера. Температура воды в них плюс 18 градусов. Над поверхностью воды находятся куполообразные своды, заполненные теплым воздухом. Не исключено, что из этих озер, постоянно подогреваемых снизу, в океан вытекают настоящие реки теплой воды. За тысячи лет они могли создать подо льдом и под землей огромные туннели, вполне пригодные для устройства тайных баз. Со стороны океана, поднырнув под прибрежными льдами, туда может спокойно зайти любая подводная лодка. Вот вам и готовая база. Без штормов и полярных холодов. Абсолютно скрытая от постороннего глаза. Вне досягаемости для любого противника.
Если бы немцы решили разместить какие-то секретные базы создать или секретные зоны, которые как бы имели статус экстерриториальности, то полярные зоны, в том числе Антарктида, была совершенно естественным районом нахождения подобного рода баз или анклавов.
Судя по обнаруженным документам и воспоминаниям участников событий, нацисты на самом деле создавали в Антарктиде сверхсекретную базу. Она носила кодовое название «База-211». Уже с начала 1939 года между Антарктидой и Германией начинаются регулярные рейсы специально переоборудованного исследовательского судна «Швабия». На землю королевы Мод перевозится горнопроходческое оборудование и другая техника, в том числе рельсовые дороги, вагонетки и огромные фрезы для проходки тоннелей. Туда же прибывают ученые, инженеры, высококвалифицированные рабочие. Для чего Германии была нужна столь удаленная база? Предположения высказываются разные. Одни полагают, что с ее помощью немцы хотели контролировать южные моря. Другие считают, что Германию привлекали полезные ископаемые Антарктиды, особенно уран, без которого невозможно создание сверхоружия. А кто-то утверждает, что на случай проигрыша в войне в Антарктиде готовилось убежище для элиты Третьего Рейха. И что якобы уже с 1942 года в Новую Швабию началась переброска ее будущих жителей. Не только ученых и специалистов, но и...
Aliens are coming. Are you prepared?
Hey!
Hello, my name is Alvin Peters, and I have a video that I'd like to show you today.
This particular video was leaked to me by a contact that I have within the Sigma organization. And for those of you who don't know, Sigma is the primary source of disinformation on UFOs and extraterrestrial phenomena. One of the important things to note about Sigma is that videos, films that they have in their possession do not leave their possession. They stay there. And the reason for that is because they tell the truth. They're undoctored, unfiltered videos, and they're also tagged with a code which enables Sigma to trace where that particular film is at, how it's being shown, how it's being used. But because this is a video of a video, we don't have to worry about that. It's not our concern. So let me go ahead and show it to you, and I'll explain as we go along. Now what you see here is a Space Shuttle 1986 landing at Kennedy Center. What is obvious here is the bright orbs which seem to be accompanying the Space Shuttle as it comes in. What is important to note here is that the cameraman doesn't zoom in on. There's no panic. There isn't any kind of concern about these orbs. They seem to be following along in a non-threatening way, escorting, if you will, the Space Shuttle as it lands at Kennedy Center. As you know, these things have been called Foo Fighters, just bright lights, orbs, whatever. And they've been reported for many, many years by commercial pilots and military pilots alike. There's many cases of World War II pilots that have been accompanied by this particular phenomena. Also, commercial pilots over the years have also found them and seen them, and they followed them in. I think that what's important, very important to note, is that this type of work never sees the light of day. Never. So please, keep searching and stay true.
If you flew on Air France from Nice to London on January 28, 1994, your captain says he saw a UFO 1,000 feet long just outside your window.
It seemed to be a huge flying disc.
The now retired pilot is one of 14 men, mainly former government and military officials from 7 different countries, talking about their UFO experiences.
It disappeared in about 10 to 20 seconds.
This conference took place in Washington, and the cast of characters was almost strangely, well, conventional. One of the believers, former governor of Arizona, Fife Symington.
I saw something that defied logic and challenged my reality.
During a visit to Phoenix, Symington described to me what he saw.
If you had been here 10 years ago and standing out here and looking up there at the lights and the view, you would have been astounded. You would have been amazed.
The so-called Phoenix
සිට බුත්තල ප්‍රදේශයට ක්‍රමයෙන් පැමිණි බවයි ඔවුන් පවසන්නේ.
ප්‍රදේශයට ක්‍රමයෙන් පැමිණි බවයි ඔවුන් පවසන්නේ.
Hey!
Report last week on Mars. Here we will analyze the past week of weather as recorded from orbit from the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter and the data from the MAVEN mission as it becomes available. MAVEN entered orbit on December 8, 2014 and is now fully into its science phase at Mars. The Solar Energetic Particle Instrument has already observed significant solar activity both in the form of flares and coronal mass ejections from the Sun to Mars. MAVEN also generated a map of Mars's ozone layer from the lower atmosphere and has now provided a view of the escaping atmosphere of Mars, showing the loss of atomic oxygen, atomic carbon, and atomic hydrogen. In fact, the atmospheric pressure on Mars is so low, any water that percolates up to the surface turns to vapor and is rapidly blown away into space by the solar wind. With all this loss of atmosphere, we should start rethinking the idea of terraforming Mars. Not likely. Mars has an atmospheric density of 1% of the Earth and has no general geomagnetic field. Earth has a field that extends 10 Earth radii in the direction of the Sun and provides an ample bow shock and general field region that protects life here from all but the worst solar storms. The Mars Express mission by ESA revealed that Mars only has bubbles of magnetic fields dotting the surface and provides a vastly different interaction with the solar wind and mass ejections that has made us rethink the locations of landing and habitation sites on the Martian surface. Let's have a look at last week's weather, as seen from orbit from the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. Last week on Mars, there was no increase in solar wind speed, and there has been no coronal mass ejections that have reached the Martian environment for over a month. When we see them on LASCO, we will start following their progression out to Mars. Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter recorded common characteristics for this time of the Martian year. The large dust cloud over Iona and Serenium, generated from the local storms along the seasonal south polar cap, continued to spread westward early in the week before dissipating by week's end. Short-lived localized dust storms were observed in Chryse, Salus, Serenium, Cimmeria, Assidius, and the Phalegra Montis. High-altitude clouds occurred frequently near Eos, Chasm, and Valmarinaris, and northeast of Hellas. Water ice clouds associated with the North Polar Hood continued to be the predominant weather feature over the northern plains, with an occasional lee wave cloud, known for their ripple-like appearance, were observed on the eastern side of topographic highs, craters, and ridges. The southern extent of the polar hood stretched over Acidalia, Deuteronius, and Utopia. Afternoon conditions in Valmarinaris were hazy. Both rovers Curiosity and Gale Crater and Opportunity on Meridiani Planum experienced storm-free afternoon skies throughout the week. The bizarre Martian magnetic field densities to the west of the Tharsis region provided some protection from the ongoing solar wind streams that reach the Mars orbit and are evidently affecting the unprotected surface regions with greater severity than the magnetically protected region. Seen here from the ESA Mars Express mission, the bizarre auroral display was imaged once the spacecraft entered orbit and revealed the field regions in the area southwest of the Tharsis Shield region. As previously discussed, these bubbles of magnetic fields may be the only possible locations offering protection from solar radiation from manned missions to the Red Planet. They apparently moderate weather as well. The field directions, nanotesla intensity, and regions have been well mapped at this point, as seen in this projection. The strongest is about minus 60 degrees south latitude and 180 degrees east longitude, seen here in the magnetometer map southwest of the Tharsis region, about midpoint between the Hellas region and the Argyll quadrangle. The nanotesla strength field direction map shows the strongest magnetic field strength is centered at minus 45 south latitude, 180 east longitude. This is a likely site for the highest level of long-term habitation protection on Mars. Unfortunately, none of the American rovers currently on the surface are in this area and cannot directly monitor radiation effect comparisons. On the LASCO video over the time period, we see no coronal mass ejections as the sun is pretty quiet, but we can also watch the ISWA record of the inner planet Enlil spiral showing directed energy as a strong flow increasing intensity of solar wind. Mars has a 95% carbon dioxide atmosphere. It only reaches 70 degrees Fahrenheit at the equator in the middle of the summer, so atmospheric carbon has little, if anything, to do with atmospheric heating. On Earth, heating occurs by solar input, then carbon increases. If it was the other way around, the global warming gang would have an argument. They don't. Just like on Ben Davidson's Suspicious Observers site, it's the sun affecting planetary atmosphere, not carbon. There is no petrochemical industry on Mars, and the Martians aren't driving cars and operating coal-fired plants. And Mars is in a deep freeze most of the time. Pollution is the problem on Earth, not carbon, and we agree with Ben. It's the same on Mars as on Earth. Only the sun can significantly change a planetary's atmospheric temperature. So here are some shots of the rovers operating on the surface to close. It's the 3,191st day of the mission since orbital insertion of the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. It's winter in the Northern Hemisphere, and solar noon at Mount Olympus. See you next week with another Mars weather report from the ongoing data stream from orbit. We will be adding the MAVEN data as it becomes publicly available, but in the meantime, keep looking up and out there.
Forward. Let me read my prepared statement, and then we'll roll a short video that Captain McAndrew will talk about.
And when he talks about the video, he says in a verse, "We faked it."
We faked it.
We faked it. We faked it. And the video claimed that they were test dummies that people had seen, and they weren't alien bodies. So that's sort of a pretty straightforward reversal. They've faked it. I don't know how else you could interpret that one. And
well, there's no other way to do it. And I remember when that story came out, and you could almost hear the laughter of people who have been following Roswell for a long, long time. This was one of the most egregious lies the Air Force ever charged one of its own to deliver to the public media, that the actual issue was a crash dummy. I mean, it was so absurd and asinine, it was embarrassing. That's how bad it was.
Oh, it really was. Yeah, it was shocking. And here we have another reversal from that same interview.
I'm sorry, I just don't have any information for that. All I know is what the Air Force did, and that if you overlay much of their claims and you look at the Air Force scientific research, you can see it's obvious that what we're talking about at Roswell.
And here he says, share a secret with NASA.
Share a secret with NASA.
Share a secret with NASA. Share a secret with NASA. So clearly, yes, something is there, and that reversal occurs right where he says the Air Force's scientific research. So clearly, something was shared with NASA. So.
Well, obvious intrigue, obvious conspiracy, obvious lies again. So it's the lie of omission. It's what they're not telling us that is crucial.
Yeah, absolutely correct. Now we're moving on to a chap named Colonel Philip Corso, who's since deceased, and he came out and wrote a book called The Day After Roswell, where he claimed he had seen alien bodies from Roswell. So here he says, forwards, I saw a body in Fort Riley, Kansas.
Saw a body at Fort Riley, Kansas, but I put that out of my mind until I could corroborate the information.
And here he says, I looked at it. So that's a congruent reversal. He's telling us the truth when he says, I saw an alien body.
What's really interesting about that, and is so often the case with reversals, is his tone of voice in reverse. He's very professional, he's matter of fact, he's reporting exactly what happened like a military officer might. That's amazing.
Yeah, right, exactly right. And here he is again, saying, there was no doubt this was a body and not a test dummy.
There was no question in my mind what it was. I know the difference between a body like that I saw there and a dummy.
And here he says, they got it.
They got it. They got it. They got it.
Meaning, they got it, meaning the body, the dead body.
They got it, meaning the body, yeah. Yes, so he's telling a true story, and in point of fact, all his reversals that he had in this whole interview were very congruent reversals. So there you go.
Interesting man, Philip Corso. He was a World War II figure who has, if you look him up, Philip Corso had quite a distinguished career, and people were rather shocked when he put this book out. Because why would a man in the twilight years of his life want to risk a truly storied career in service to his country? A career military officer who served again through World War II and after World War II. So it was a very interesting issue.
Yes, indeed. All right, now we're going to look at some reversals on Michael Malin, who's the official photographer for the Mars Global Explorer, and many people have levelled charges at Michael Malin that he's been altering pictures and doing all sorts of weird and wonderful things. So let's see what the reversals have to say. And here we have the first one. This is a very long reversal, this one. It's about 8 words, or 9, 10 words, which is very unusual. Let's run it forward first.
But I can't be any more specific than that, any more than you could,
Hey! Hey!
طلع عندي هون يا مصلي يا شيخ هي راس المسيح وفي راس وراء عم يشد على سنينه هيك عم يكذب اذا بطلعت كانه عم يتعذب عم يكون
So if you have a lost dog, phone, camera, wallet, phone, let us know. No, don't let us know. That was a very exceptional lost and found story.
Lo sento, no? Va, corre, yo, tía, va.
Documental, cuando se encuentran de frente con la peor pesadilla de su infancia.
And the cross think as well, so they're heating themselves up next to the chimney, having a bite, nice and warm.
Hey.
Very highly classified government project that is ongoing and that affects every man, woman, and child in this country. People need to know what is going on. He also sent me some documents, he faxed them to me, that verify everything he said. These documents are classified material. There are some white papers from the Department of Defense, from the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, known as DARPA, also from Naval Intelligence. There's also a document from the CIA. And I've looked over them, and I've familiarized myself with them very, very carefully over the past few days while I'm trying to recover. This information needs to be released to the public. And what that information is this. In 1995, our government commissioned a project to place into the public water supply, into the public food distribution system, a a very small device, a nano-sized device with a microprocessor. It is an electronic device, and it is about the size of 1 or 2 grains of sand. It took years to develop, but they developed it, they've perfected the technology, they've tested it, and as of today, according to their estimates, 85% of the population has one of these devices inside of their bodies. Now these, you could say you're infected, in other words. You have been infected with one of these devices. They're incredibly small. They can barely be seen with the naked eye. They have to be removed from the medium that they are suspended in. It could be food, it could be water, but if you take it out and if you put it on a table, preferably a black surface, and you look at it, you're going to be able to see it. It's very hard, it's opaque, but let me put it this way, you'd never know it was there. If you've consumed it, which you probably have, as I said, 87% of the population has one of these in their bodies, right, as presently, as the military has estimated. Okay, so what is it? Why did the military develop this device and put it in the water supply and try to basically infect the entire U.S. population with it? Well, it's a very simple device, folks. It is designed to kill you. It is designed to terminate you. That's what it does. It's very simple. It doesn't really do anything else. Now, how does it kill you? It goes something like this. It is, again, the size of a grain of sand or so, a little bit bigger. It is a nano device. It contains a microprocessor. It contains a receiver. And it can receive a transmission, radio transmission. Once it receives this radio transmission, which is very specific, and can only, it's something, let me put it this way, it is a frequency that is only our military uses and only knows about. It's not going to just be randomly activated while you're walking down the street. So it's activated by this signal. Now how do they do it? Well, their cell towers cover 98% of this country in terms of coverage. Cell towers, radio towers. In addition to that, our military has spent about 5 years setting up a proprietary system, that of coverage, not in addition to the cell towers. So what they've done in any large population center, they have installed transmitters, very small, and they're in strategic locations. They cover every block of every large city and even small cities, and this has been set up over the past 5 years. The reason they want to do that is they want to be able to target these populations very specifically in a very small locality. Okay? Now what do these devices do? Okay, they kill you. How do they do it? I don't know fully, but what they do is it induces flu-like symptoms in the body. It causes the body to release antibodies that, in addition to causing flu-like symptoms, it will cause your body to produce antibodies that are indicative of a flu virus infection. You will die within 10 to 12 days. The effectiveness, is what they call it in their documents, is 98%. That means 98% of people with which this device is implanted, or they are infected with this device, once it is activated with the radio signal, 98% of people are dead within 10 to 12 days. 2% recover. And the recovery reasons are not fully known. It is often outside influences. It could be a malfunction of the device. Right now our military wants to get it to 99%. It's at 98 right now. Basically, if this device has been activated in a population area, let's say they use a cell tower to send a signal out, you're going to see everybody around you, including yourself, sick with a very severe case of what appears to be the flu. You'll go to the doctor, they won't be able to help you, it will continue to get progressively worse. Your lungs are going to fill up with fluid. In fact, that's going to be a symptom that will be very pronounced in all of these cases, and there's a reason for that. That is because the device, it enters the brain and it activates certain autoimmune responses that are indicative of a severe case of the flu. And this response is sort of like a runaway nuclear chain reaction. In other words, it causes your body to just absolutely melt down. So, again, it's very effective. It has been shown to work in 98% of the cases. And most of the time, it just looks like a very bad case of the flu. A couple things I wanted to address before I go. Again, with this information, it's of the highest order of urgency. I hope you share it with family and friends. I hope.
There's no such thing as aliens. You're fine.
Hey. 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 Hey.
I know it sounds crazy.
Hey. Hey.
Aliens are coming. Are you prepared?
Hey.
Aliens are not your friends. Visitors that will come to this planet, people will look at and see something not from here. They will see an alien. And it will not be your friends. You've been told, but you won't believe. You're mystified at the thought that something else is out there besides you. And there are interdimensional beings. But that is where angels are. That's where heaven's at. That's where hell's at. It's a whole different dimension. And there are different dimensions where each one can be found.
Tiho said TEPCO needs more tanks to store the contaminated water, but also mentioned the shortage of storage space. He said officials should consider options such as discharging filtered water into the sea. He urged them to come up with a plan to control the nuclear waste.
Is awesome. He is such a nice guy, and I was kind of intimidated at first because I'd been watching Keir Sedgwick forever, and I'm like, oh God, I don't know, do I have the chops? And
I know it sounds crazy.
Hey!
Aliens are coming. Are you prepared?
A moth that resembles a wasp is less likely to be eaten by a predator. Good camouflage requires that an animal closely resembles the local flora, and any changes that occur to the plants in an area could be fatal to an animal that was unable to adapt to the new selection pressures.
Fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. Open your mind.
My friends and loyal subjects, we have worked together to overcome the greatest physical hardships the world has ever known. World War, drought, famine, pestilence, fire, earthquakes, and volcanoes of unprecedented violence. But we have prevailed, thanks to our fantastic computer technology and the intervention of His Satanic Majesty. Where, dear friend, was the loving God of creation during our recent perils? Was He helping mankind, the children of His creation? No. On the contrary, it is He who has visited these disasters upon us. And to you, God, God of wrath and destruction to mankind, I say, do your worst. We will prevail. You do nothing that I say. Open your mind.
That's common ice and getting struck by some object. Watch this. That's gotta be my all-time favorite. I love you guys. God bless you. One more time. Common ice and getting struck by an object. It's still the mystery of the world, ain't it? We love you, friends. God bless. Hug the kids, hug the wife. Yo, Marine.
Say hi.
Parece muito lindo os sóis. Ali, ó. Ali tem os sóis. Ali tem outro. Gente, eu tô mostrando, ó. Um ali e outro ali, ó. Vocês acham que vocês só tem um só aqui em Nova York? Ali, ó. Um. Nós não estamos mentindo, é verdade.
Pretty food soon. Tea time soon. Yeah. I'll go get you a bib in a minute.
Then let's eat food. You
Well.
cut them out.
put it for 5 and for 3 hours, so I'm going to give it about 6.
Did you give it the earlier you give it in?
Yeah,
Then
the next one is.
Yeah, and then we can.
No, I'll get it in a minute.
Yeah, look, still, it's shining still. Oh, even the damage doesn't like this is some bubbles. What did you do? Look, oh, the table, look. Why is this a few bubbles?
And the river symbols of autumnal equinox, we should also examine the symbolism of Tiamat. Tiamat's earliest depictions are as upright walking, four-legged snakes with wings, frequently seen wearing crowns. Here we see twin Tiamats of this form holding twin corsair swords by the blades towards a single serpent coiled around itself in 6 loops with a head at both ends of its body. Just as the male doll from the earliest Uruk period depicted the same elongated head motif as the fish priests of Chaldea, so too does the female counterpart of that doll exhibit very similar facial features to a reptile, such as a serpent. She holds a small baby to her breast, and the baby appears to have horns. The reptilian motif has long been a symbol for Tiamat. In this Uruk period carving of a life-scale mask, we find the same reptilian features as the serpent symbolizing Tiamat. Just as Tiamat, symbolized by the winged, four-legged dragons encaging the twin-headed serpent, guards the tree of life, so are their guardians over the tree of knowledge. While the tree of life was symbolized by the twin-headed serpent, the tree of knowledge is a complex geometrical arrangement of 13 blossoms on a vine lattice around a central blooming trunk. While the guardians of the 15-flamed arched doorway were the fish-robed men symbolizing winter, the guardians of the 13 blossoming tree of knowledge are garbed as birds with the head of the phoenix and 2 wings. They water the tree of knowledge and pick the blossoms from it, and just as the dragons ensnaring the double-headed snake of the tree of life, these anthropomorphized avians also represent Tiamat. To return to the doings of the god while he sat on his cubic throne and was not riding the sky in his Faravarhar Vimana, when we finally see him equaled in stature, it comes from this low relief from Lagash. On one side sits the god, offering in his outstretched right hand the ring and the rod symbolizing kingship. On the opposite side sits a goddess, wearing the same form of turban crown as the god, reaching out to receive the offering with her left hand. Between them grows a single enormous potted leaf. Note that the god holds back his scepter flail. Next, we see another extremely ancient cylinder seal imprint, dating from 6,000 to 7,000 years ago. We see on the far right a tree with 8 branches, each with 1 leaf. To the left of this tree sits the goddess on her cubic throne, wearing a crown of crescent horns. She holds in her lap a young child with a single long forelock of hair. Below the child, at the goddess's feet, is a pit dug in the ground. On the opposite side of this pit from the goddess stands a man with short hair and no beard offering up a cup. Behind this man, on the far left, is another man kneeling down to adjust the lid atop a canister that sits on a short tripod platform. Above this is a shelf with 3 narrow vases on it. In this mid to late Akkadian cylinder seal, we see all these elements depicted in one scene. On the outermost flanks are the twin, bird-headed and winged men representing Tiamat. They apply their blossoms to the fish priests, who, in turn, apply the river symbols from the god above to a 15-stemmed, newly budding tree. Above, in the center, we see again the god in his Faravarhar Vimana, now facing the opposite direction he was when he arrived to be greeted by the fish priests. Here is a later post-Babylonian cylinder seal inscription showing 4 epic heroes, each alike Gilgamesh in facial appearance, kneeling to hold up standards bearing the symbols of the 4 seasons. On the left, we see the orb form of Tiamat symbolizing summer, the water symbol representing autumn, the fish man symbolizing winter, and the crescent symbol representing the return once again to spring. A rising serpent marks the end and restart date per annum. As we shall see, the use of animalistic symbols to signify the 4 elemental seasons was a precursor to the Babylonian Dendara zodiacs, as well as Egyptian and Mesoamerican hieroglyphics, and began a trend that has not stopped since. Here we see the Ishtar Gate of Babylon, erected 2,575 years ago. It is decorated with low reliefs of bulls, signifying summer, lions with their tails up or down representing spring and autumn, and, representing winter, we come back again to Tiamat. In this image from a Sumerian cylinder seal, at least some 5,000 years old, we see the god standing upright on the left, identified by his beard. He displays the gesture of supplication toward Tiamat, depicted as a 4-legged serpent. On Tiamat's back is a platform or saddle, in the middle of which stands an erect pillar or column, at the top of which is a triangle pointing upward. The combined height of Tiamat and this pillar is equal to the height of the upright standing god. From a pre-Babylonian cylinder seal, we imprint this image, showing the god on the left, identified by his beard and turban crown, drawing back a bowstring to shoot an arrow toward a winged Tiamat, who appears on the right, rearing back on its hind legs. The image of Tiamat resembles a combination of the 4-legged serpent, lion, and bull motifs. Between the god and Tiamat, above the trajectory of the arrow, sits the winged disc motif of Ahura Mazda's Faravarhar. Beneath this, between the god and Tiamat, is a crowned and bearded supplicant, surrounded in a sphere offering 3 small orbs toward the god. The battle between the god and Tiamat is further depicted in this low-relief cylinder seal from the Akkadian Empire era. The god in the upper left shoots his arrow toward Tiamat, seen in mid-retreat, aimed directly at Tiamat's head. Again, we see Tiamat as an exospecies of zoomorph, resembling a combination of avian and reptilian characteristics, with feet and wings like a bird, and the torso and head of a snake. Behind Tiamat's turned head, in the direction of its body's retreat, we see a 7-rayed orb above, and below an 11-petaled arc. Beneath the feet of the god crouches a griffin, that is, a winged lion, which may depict the god's Faravarhar from the side. In this low-relief carving from the era of the First Babylonian Empire, Tiamat appears again on the retreat from the god. However, here their positions are reversed from left to right. Tiamat, on the left, looks over its winged shoulder at the god, on the right, who is chasing after Tiamat, carrying a bundle of 3 arrows in each hand. Tiamat appears as a combinatory zoomorph again, with the head of a bull, the neck of a snake, the front paws and torso of a lion, the back legs and 2 wings of a bird. The god appears with 1 foot off the ground, his customary beard and crown, and 4 wings. Here we see Tiamat as a combinatory zoomorph, again from the Babylonian wall carving. Note the manneristic attention paid to the thumbs on its front paws. The nails or claws on them are crooked. Here we can more clearly see Tiamat has the horns of a bull, the belly of a snake, and the back of a bird. Its snarling face appears in great detail with an emphasis on its bat-like nostrils and fangs. This statuette from the Akkadian Empire period shows a character very similar to Tiamat. This mixed zoomorph has the legs of a ram or goat, male genitalia, the paws of a lion, 4 wings, and the hairless head of a snarling lion. This statuette represents Pazuzu, the demigod of the southwest wind. There are similar miniature busts from this era that show Pazuzu in greater detail, with 3 concentric circles for eyes, an upturned nose like a pig, shallow cheeks, and a menacing set of fangs. Other zoomorphs include lion-headed upper torso busts with the neck and front legs of a dragon. As we see in this circular arrangement of glyphs from Babylonian Chaldea, the zoomorphs cataloged by the people of this era included an array of familiar animals alongside representations of combined trait beasts. We see in this zodiac a snake, a bird, a turtle, 2 beehives, a dog, and a scorpion. We see also 3 orbs, from left to right a crescent, a 4-point star emanating 4 wave symbols, and an 8-point star.